Hello, and welcome back to Full Frontal Philosophy. I am your host, Aaron Green, and we'll keep talking about talking. So, if you've watched the previous episodes or shows, you'll have noticed that I have been teasing the idea of an entropy, or entropy in general, but not defining it. And the reason I've been talking around it but not getting to what it is that there's no way to understand entropy or even investigate entropy if you're not motivated. If you're just curious, if you try to come at it from any angle that you're comfortable with, if you try to fit it into the framework that you use for everything else, if you try to understand it in terms of all the things that you've already learned or any method that you already understand, you'll either get it wrong or you'll just give up. Most people just give up. So it's very important to understand that if you want to talk about talking, and you first need to understand that you can't investigate the foundation of communication scientifically, or you can't establish a foundation for it by some sort of verbal agreement, because obviously that would be based on communication. And if you're communicating and trying to agree on a foundation for communication using communication, you end up just following the leader, whoever that may be, which is not a foundation. You also can't find some abstract place where communication exists outside of reality, because obviously we are confined to the reality that we have. So there's no way to find the foundation within the sort of established methods or modes of communication, or modes of thought, I suppose, logic or evaluation. Everything starts to break down. And so it's only when you have that motivation to find some method that is beyond or outside of the methods that you've learned that you start to look at entropy. And that's where entropy comes up. It comes up in those places where people have found a lack. Whether it's Boltzmann or Shannon or even Max Planck, there's no way to get there. There's no way to sort of tell somebody how to get there. I guess to illustrate, we'll go back to making a circle. So get out our Play-Doh, because everything starts with Play-Doh. And we'll make a circle. So the first thing I'm going to do when I make a circle is just spin. And again, look, I'm not really working very hard. It's just to get a shape aligned. I put it together, and then to make it circular, I'll just kind of spin it. And the more I spin it, and the better I spin it, the more circular. And eventually it looks like a circle. So the question is, how do we describe what just happened? How did I make a circle? How did this stuff, what makes this stuff a circle? So we've had circles forever. Circles are, of course, universal. And what we want is to see that all the bits are equally far away from all the other bits. But what does that mean? Like, what is the relationship between the parts of a circle that make a circle? There's nothing specific to one part that is circular. And this is the challenge, is that if we try to take it apart, we never find, there's no circular bit in there. As we try to investigate it, we just break it up. We mess it up and it no longer is a circle. And then we have to start over. And again, I'll just roll it out. And it's not that hard to make a circle. right? Like, or at least a circular thing. And actually, if there's one shape that you sort of find most often, it will be the circle. Because there's something funny about it, isn't there? But what is the relationship then? How do these things have a relationship? Obviously, there's the pi relationship between the diameter and the circumference. And I think this is the problem that Margaret Thatcher had when she said she didn't believe there's no such thing as society. So for Thatcher and her followers, there's no way to define the relationships that make this bunch of bits into a circle. There's no way to say how to make a circle, how to tell one part of this object to come into a relationship with all the other parts. And that's just true. There's no linear project or no linear function that will produce a circle. It's the relationship of all the parts. You can't instruct one bit and another bit. So for Thatcher and people, and conservatives more or less universally, all you can tell people to do is to pile up, right? Be on top of the pile. That's the only way to stay together. And you are under you and are under you. And it's ugly, but it's directable, right? You can tell people what to do, and the people on the bottom are on the bottom and the people on the top are on the top, and it's ordered. And you can give people the order to get on top of each other. But a circle depends on everybody working together or not. Or at least in some kind of conjunction, and it's not ordered, right? There's no top part, there's no specific, there's no linear order to a circle. And the same thing happens when physicists try to talk about entropy. Sabine Hossenfelder, who's probably the most well-known internet physicist at the moment, she just produced a video in which she entitled, "I Don't Believe in Entropy." And it's exactly the same thing as Thatcher's, "There's no such thing as society." There's no such thing as a relationship that is not linear. And so there's no way to define the relationship between the parts of the circle that make it circular. It just happens. And I think maybe another better way of going about this is to say, another way to make a circle is just to randomly roll this bit. And this gets you a better idea of how entropy works, how it becomes so very important in everything that we do, and why pi comes up all over the place. Pi produces, in some sense, pi is a model of the maximum entropy of the relationship between the pieces of the circle, the pieces of all the particles of Plato, and all the other particles. So when we think about pi and where it comes up wherever you have sort of a relationship between one individual parts and a whole, any kind of whole. Whether that's the relationship between the circle and its circumference, the diameter and the circumference, or the relationship between a wave and its length, the height and the length, that's always going to be, pi is going to show up because, again, there's a randomness in it. So when we make this sphere, the best way to make a sphere is going to be to completely randomize the impact or the touch of my hands. And that randomization is what gives me the best circle. So what we can start to see is that the relationship between any given any given whole, any given ensemble, and the individual bits of the ensemble is going to be represented by then an entropy. Now, how do we use that idea? And this is where it gets a bit more complicated, because it's very important to understand that while there is a statistical method of investigating how different parts fit together by sampling it, the sampling process it can be destructive, but also the probability, the notion of a statistical method, it's only a model for the entropy, it's not the entropy itself. So it's very tempting to sort of to go off on the tangent of saying that entropy is just a probability or a function of likelihood. But Akaike makes this very important point, which is that the likelihood function is only an approximation of the entropy. The entropy is the actual relationship. Whether we think of entropy as a real thing, as sort of the real relationship between the parts and the whole, or just an imaginary relationship, doesn't actually matter. And the fact is that our experience of reality indicates that there are real relationships that we can't define in linear terms. So society, for example, clearly exists, right? There is a British society that voted Margaret Thatcher into office. It gave her the power to make those statements, that she was speaking to a magazine. The fact that there is a language shared by many people, again, is a function of society. It's not something you can define in linear terms, and it's not something you can order, but it is something that exists. And so, in a sense, it doesn't matter whether entropy is real or artificial. Circles exist, and that's the outcome, and that's what's useful. So what makes the circle, what makes this idea so useful, and I think to investigate further, we'll go further in subsequent episodes, is that we can say from the circle, if we don't even have to agree that this is round. I can say there is a thing that is the maximum entropy of the relationship between the whole and its parts. And whether it appears round or diffuse, right, like this could be a cloud, that statement, that maximization of entropy, makes it universal. And so, in a sense, I can show this to you, and you already know that that's the case, because you can see its approximation of that maximum entropy. Or I can tell you and hide it, and it's still the same. And I think that's where we get the idea that you can agree on certain universals. The circle or the bubble is one universal. The wave, sort of a sine wave, that's another universal. And that's obviously what we use to talk. We use waves and interactions. And the key here is that we can start with the universal, and if I squash it and say, we started, and here I can show you that, and you know that that's a squashed circle. And you don't even have to, you know that if it started as a circle and it's been squashed, something happened. It is changed. And that change is what allows us to communicate, to say, to use that, anything that's altered, we can use that as a symbol for some other thing. And obviously with words, we use lots of different waves, and we combine them in different ways to communicate. But it is that difference from the universal, right? We can say, this is our test pattern, if this is, or this can be the signal. This can be the transmission pattern. And then when we want to send a message, I can squash it. And that's a message pattern. And then I can always get it back to the base signal. And it'll start over, and I can show you this. And as long as this is there, you know that nobody has tried to, that I haven't tried to send you anything. And then I can squash it, and now I've sent you something. And with words, we can say we start with the signal function, which can be just a pure note, which isn't very good because my voice isn't very good. And then if I break that up, then we can start to have sounds. We go Obviously, Morse code would be simple, but then with language we get more and more complex. But it's not the language, it's not the symbols that make it work. It's the fundamental fact. The foundation is going to always come back to some maximum entropy that allows us to agree on a foundation without even having to agree. So it's that law without laws, as Wheeler put it, that allows us to communicate across boundaries, no matter what those boundaries are, and to remember across time. And all of these things and all of the possibilities of communication always come back to some maximum entropy, some foundation, some universal. So I'll leave it there for now, and we'll be back, hopefully, with another episode talking about talking. Thank you.